might think this updated Polestar 2, this Swedish EV brand's most important model, looks hardly any different from the original. Much though has changed. As well as being a little smarter to look at, it's better to drive, charges quicker, and goes much further on energy from its more advanced battery packs. As before, it's a high-quality sporting mid-sized EV, a rare and rather unique 5-door hatch with quality, handling and battery technology, all benchmarked against the best that the premium segment competition can offer.
The Polestar 2 remains this fresh Swedish EV brand's most important model. It's a high-quality sporting EV, a rare and rather unique 5-door hatch with quality, handling and battery technology, all benchmarked against the best that the premium segment competition can offer. And despite appearances, it's been fundamentally improved in the revised form we're going to test here. You may now vaguely be aware of the Polestar brand as Volvo's luxury platform for uniquely designed sporting electric models. Every premium marque makes an EV these days, of course, but many of them merely feel like battery-powered versions of existing cars. For an early adopter to plug-in motoring, there's an undeniable appeal in the clean sheet approach that segment originator Tesla's products bring to the table. Polestar aims to deliver that, but combine it with the depth of engineering you'd get from a more established manufacturer. Which in 2020 was what brought us this Polestar 2, a mid-sized premium EV crossover that's done its share of shaking up the market and managed to find over 11,000 owners in the UK in its first 2 years on sale. From launch, almost everything a conscientious EV adopter might want was promised with this car: decent driving range, sustainable manufacturing, a vegan interior, and more than a dash of cutting-edge technology too. This was the first model in the world to feature an infotainment system powered by Google's Android Automotive OS system, which claimed to redefine what you could expect from in-car infotainment and connectivity. But the competition has been catching up, so in mid-2023, Polestar fundamentally reimagined what this car can be and produced a lot more than just a mid-term facelift. You can't see the key changes, but they're really significant. New, longer-ranging drive batteries and a switch from front to rear-wheel drive for the more affordable single-motor derivatives, like this one, that most customers choose. When was the last time you heard of that as part of a mere mid-term facelift? And will it all be enough to keep this car near the top of its now ever more closely fought segment, that for mid-sized premium badged EVs? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive test, this car and driving review, to find out. Plenty's different here with this revised Polestar 2, and we'll brief you on that shortly. But the approach here hasn't changed. We get the Polestar concept, creation of electric cars for the kind of driver who'd normally choose a conventional premium sports saloon. But as such a customer, you might understandably have a few qualms about choosing such a thing from a subsidiary of the Volvo marque, a maker yet to deliver any sort of enthusiast-orientated product, and a brand that these days limits the top speed of all its cars to 112 miles an hour. News that this Polestar 2 is based around the stodgy underpinnings of a Volvo XC40 small SUV might also be discouraging if you like your driving. But back in 2020, at its original launch, we advised you to give this Sino-Scandinavian model a chance and go and try one. And we still think you should. If you do and get yourself behind the wheel, you'll find that, like so many EVs these days, there's no keyhole, no starter button, in fact no ignition sequence of any kind. Instead, once you're comfortably ensconced on the vegan upholstery, you merely knock the curiously fashioned hexagon-shaped central gear selector back twice into D with your foot on the brake, and off you go, rather rapidly. It's difficult to imagine how quickly this car would spear away from rest if it didn't weigh almost as much as a Range Rover. Okay, you might not find the electrified rush as satisfying as the combustion thrust you might be used to, but at least in this case it's delivered as part of a car that feels as if it has proper automotive genes rather than being merely the product of a tech company. You definitely wouldn't think you were driving any kind of Volvo, even though this car shares not only its CMA platform, but also all its powertrains with that brand's electric XC40 and C40 models, which are SUVs, like the Chinese Lynk & Co. 01, another Geely Group model that uses the same engineering. Without that crossover class all-steel chassis, this model would probably sit a little closer to the ground, with a few kilos less to carry about, and it'd obviously be a better driver's car as a result. Certainly setting off with a 200 kilogram weight disadvantage over a rival Tesla Model 3 isn't a particularly good start. Plus, this car does without the dynamic driving modes and pretend engine noises favoured by most of its more direct rivals. Is it really serious about being sporty? Well, the answer is yes, especially in this revised form. And if you had any doubt about that, proof is provided by Polestar's decision to switch the volume single motor variants, the ones most people will choose, from a front to a rear driven format. It's difficult to think of a more fundamental engineering change than that. And it's certainly not the sort of thing you expect to see as part of a mere mid-term update. And that's come at the same time as a 23% power increase, a 33% gain in pulling power, and a gain of around 20% in EV driving range. Hardly inconsequential figures. It's a single motor model that we're trying here, and it's the long range one you'll probably want. That moniker denoting the use of this car's largest 82 kilowatt hour battery size, supplied by CATL and up from 78 kilowatt hours before. That'll take you up to 406 miles, a useful increase on the 339 mile figure of the entry-level standard range single motor variant, which uses a 69 kilowatt hour battery, also new as part of the update changes. As well as a switch of drive power to the rear axle, both versions gain a new electric motor mounted upon it. This develops 268 brake horsepower in the base model, which takes you to 60 miles an hour in 6.2 seconds, or 295 brake horsepower in this single motor long range version, which improves the sprint time only fractionally to 5.9 seconds, though that's a decent improvement over the equivalent pre-facelift model, where the sprint time was the wrong side of 7 seconds. Should you prefer the pricier long-range dual-motor Polestar 2, also energised by the newly developed 82 kilowatt-hour long-range battery, there are more driveline changes. A second electric motor's been added to the front axle. It's asynchronous rather than synchronous this time. But to go with the whole new rear-biased vibe, there's a now more rear axle-based torque split. Total system output rises to a prodigious 416 brake horsepower, 14 more than before, with 760 newton meters of torque, 100 more, which cuts the sprint time to just 4.3 seconds. If that's still not quick enough, customers for the all-wheel drive flagship model are offered an optional performance pack upgrade, which boosts power to 469 brake horsepower and cuts the sprint time to just 4 seconds. This option, by the way, is also being offered to customers of the pre-facelift Polestar 2 dual motor model as an over-the-air update. Both these all-wheel drive Polestar 2 variants get decent EV range increases, not only because of the slightly larger battery, but also because of a front motor disconnect function that's particularly adept at maximising mileage. The ordinary long-range dual-motor model now manages up to 368 miles, 70 miles further than before, while with the performance pack fitted, the best figure is 352 miles. A dual-motor Tesla Model 3 can beat these stats, but you'll struggle to find many other rivals that can. Meanwhile, the single-motor long-range mileage stats for the variant we're trying here are class-leading. Predictably, at the wheel of a single motor Polestar 2 like this one, the switch of drive thrust from front to rear isn't immediately obvious, unless you start throwing the thing about, which in appropriate circumstances you might be tempted to do, given the way that this Sino-Swedish contender now goes about its business with a deeper, more considered sense of purpose. Roll is resisted, the steering's accurate, and your slightly raised driving position offers a feeling of proper command. Setting the drive format to suit personal preference couldn't be much easier thanks to this drive section of the huge centre screen. If you share our view that the precise steering also has a rather gloopy feel, then you'll want to fiddle with the three provided rack settings: light, standard and firm. The last of these is of course best for fast secondary road use, at which point you might also like the provided one pedal drive brake regen system in its most abrupt standard setting, which slows the car when you come off throttle for a bend, rather like it might if you changed down a gear at corner entry with a combustion model. For suburban use, with one pedal drive set at standard, you'll hardly ever have to use the actual brake pedal except when coming to a complete stop. But if you don't like that kind of regenerative feel, as you might not for instance at highway speeds, then low or even off regeneration screen settings are available. The same drive display also offers a less intrusive sport mode for the stability system and the option to replicate the creep at idling speeds that you get from a conventional auto gearbox. What you can't have on a Polestar 2 is adaptive damping. The closest the brand gets to that are the race-style Öhlins dual flow valve manually adjustable dampers you get on the top dual motor performance pack model, which are sourced from Öhlin's parent company Tenneco and rather inconveniently have to be adjusted in a garage up on a ramp. The performance pack variant also gains track-ready Brembo brakes and stickier Continental sport contact tyres, so can deliver pretty much all the sporting focus you might want. That's fine for the flagship version, but a typical likely owner of the kind of single motor Polestar 2 model we're trying here will be more concerned with nitrous oxide emissions than the Nürburgring. Despite that, the brand has rather unwisely persisted with a rather overly firm, sporty ride with all versions of this car. It's okay at really low speeds or on the highway, but in between those two extremes, you'll really feel the tarmac tears and potholes, particularly if you've opted for the 20-inch wheel upgrade that we've got here. It's surprising that Polestar didn't take the opportunity to address this ride issue as part of this upgrade. It's the last remaining thing that keeps this contender from greatness, or more specifically from being a real thorn in the side to the car that most keener drivers might want when choosing an EV of this type, BMW's i4. All of which leaves us, well, where? Well, with a car significantly quicker than a comparably priced entry-level BMW i4, perhaps now a tad more engaging than a rival Tesla Model 3, and significantly more fun to punt about than any other full electric contender in this segment, particularly the Volvo models upon which it's based. No small achievement. Even without these advantages, we'd see a bright future for this usefully updated and curiously appealing contender, perfectly tuned as it is to mid-level executive motoring in this new post-pandemic zeitgeist. At the wheel, this doesn't feel like a first-time effort from a fledgling brand, but a mature, richly engineered design, ready to reward a more intelligent take on this rapidly diversifying segment. This might even be the class benchmark, though you'd also need to try an i4 just to be sure. Either way, the Polestar brand is demanding to be taken seriously. Not much is visually different with this revised model, which is perhaps surprising given the need to highlight its fundamental engineering changes, but that's fine with us, for few changes were really needed. Polestar has an intrinsically deep relationship with Volvo, and so does every aspect of the bodywork of this Polestar 2. Back in 2016, This design was originally a Volvo concept car, the Concept 40.2. But when Polestar's styling chief, Maximilian Missoni, saw it, he recognised in the chiselled look a shape ready to pioneer the style of an entirely new brand. This was actually the second car the company made, but it was the first true Polestar. Looks probably aren't going to be the primary reason you choose this contender, and they won't immediately advertise the fact that you've probably spent £50,000 or more on it. But if you're okay with something a little more conservatively premium, then there's plenty to like here. The tall, chunky proportions certainly couldn't be more different from the sleek, globular shape of a rival Tesla. And in fact, it doesn't really look like anything else at all, which is what you might most like about it. In theory, it's a 5-door fastback, but it sits on the compact modular architecture or CMA platform of a Volvo XC40 SUV, hence the high-sided look that Polestar likes to describe with words like urban and robotic. It's just under 1.5 metres tall. Not all of the styling flourishes work. We suggested back at launch that Missoni and his team might want to take a second stab at the front grille, which is exactly what's happened. The original conventional panel now replaced by this even less appealing Smart Zone blanking plate housed in a slim surround, which is the main way you'll identify this updated model, and where the car's mid-range radar transceiver and front-facing camera are now carried. Otherwise, things are as before. Polestar still hasn't bothered to create its own illuminating signature for the LED headlights. There's a borrowed Thor's hammer design from Volvo. And corner fog lamps come as part of an optional pilot pack. From the side, you might consider that the 2.7 metre wheelbase is rather too short for the 4.6 metre body length, and adding this rather cheap looking battery output sticker behind the front wheel arch is a little bit unnecessary. But the profile's lovely, embellished by blacked out windscreen pillars that flow into the cantilevered roof. Add in lustrous paintwork, tight shut lines and well-proportioned 19 or as in this case 20-inch wheels, and the stamp of visual quality needed for this Sino-Scandinavian battery hot rod to take on the premium badged establishment is assured. Choose the dual motor performance pack model and you'll get the 20-inch forged alloy rims that have been restyled as part of this update. The rear perspective is equally arresting, with strips of LED lighting that curl around the lower tailgate like Salvador Dali's moustache. Under the skin, that CMA platform has had to be updated with a unique front subframe for extra crash protection. Electric motors are less absorbent in an impact than an engine. Plus, there are modifications at the rear to support the heavy lithium-ion battery pack. Getting in and activating the car requires nothing more than you should have the key in your pocket, but it's a rather cheap looking square black thing, so you might prefer to download the appropriate Polestar app so that the whole entry and start procedure can be handled by your smartphone. It's a vegan interior, apparently, and if you don't happen to be a vegan, you may view the prospect of that with all the enthusiasm you might muster for a trip to your local meat-free restaurant. But actually, once inside, well, it's all rather nice, providing you happen to like the whole pared back Scandinavian vibe this car wants to draw you into, nothing of which has changed as part of this update. The backlit blade-shaped dashboard looks appealing, but trimming touches like grey fabric door and dash inserts and this charcoal headliner make it all rather dark and sombre, unless you spend a very large amount of extra money on the fancy Napa leather trimming pack we have here. Austerity emphasised by the almost complete lack of button clutter and a general reluctance to feature the kind of chrome and silver trimming that you'd normally expect from a premium brand model at this price point. You might also miss the sheer theatre of a rival Tesla Model 3's enormous centre touchscreen, though the one on offer here is hardly any smaller. And importantly, unlike with that American EV, you don't have to look at it for instrument readouts because these are provided via a further 12.3-inch binnacle display you view through the 3-spoke steering wheel. Also, unlike Tesla, Polestar still thinks you need a binnacle and column stalks and a gearshift lever. Given Polestar's Volvo ancestry, the need for cost-saving shared componentry at this price point, and perhaps the fact that Polestar CEO Thomas Ingenlath used to be head of Volvo design, you'd expect quite a few carryover parts from that Gothenburg brand, but actually all of that's quite well disguised. The steering wheel switches, stalks and climate vents are just as you'd find on the kind of comparable Volvo S60 that quite a few customers might otherwise have chosen. But these are things that didn't really need changing. More importantly, the things you interact with, like this curious hexagon-shaped gear lever, and the screen graphics are all bespoke, and the overall feeling is of a cabin that, rather refreshingly, isn't derivative of anything else in the segment. There are just 3 buttons for demist, the heated windscreen and the hazard flashers, inset into this shiny piano black panel at the base of the centre stack. These grouped around this, thankfully, physical volume control dial for the 11.15-inch central screen above, which we should brief you on a little more because you're going to be using it an awful lot. This was the first car in the world to feature an infotainment system powered by Google's Android Automotive OS system. This setup since adopted by mainstream Volvos and integrating Google Assistant, Google Maps and the Google Play Store, everything loading just as it would on an Android phone. Unlike with a conventional Android Auto system, with this setup you don't have to connect in and then still have to separately activate car stuff like seat positioning, safety system preferences and so on. Google Android Infotainment will have automatically done all that for you as you approach the car. You still can't watch Netflix or play computer games on this screen, as you could on a rival Tesla screen, but apparently Polestar's working on that, and features like YouTube access and Apple CarPlay have been added as over-the-air updates since the last time we tried this monitor. What we've got here overall continues to be one of the very best cabin monitors we've ever tried in a car of any price, with brilliantly intuitive built-in voice control, a speciality. One potential issue is the way that this display's been saddled with taking care of all the climate system controls. Not something we'd normally want, but it actually works quite well in this case. Whatever you're doing on this monitor, you merely touch this lower virtual button for ventilation functions to appear at the bottom of the layout, which then returns to a simple home screen you can configure into 4 sections. We've got Performance, Range Assistant, Apple CarPlay and Bluetooth Connect sections here, for instance. Along the top of this monitor are your primary access icons for the main menus you'll be using. The key ones are in the middle, Car and this Windows icon. Car connects you through to a choice of 4 sections, Drive being the first of these, allowing you to set up steering feel, transmission creep, stability intervention and the car's one-pedal drive system. Next in the Car menu is an Assist section dealing with camera safety stuff. And thirdly, you've got a charging area covering battery use and charge settings. And finally, there's a More screen accommodating service info. Move your finger back to the top of the screen and across to the Windows section, and you'll find yourself in an area of the monitor dealing with connectivity and route guidance. Again, there are 4 options: Google Maps, your phone settings, media features, and the Google Assistant section, which is where those drive performance energy readouts reside. Everything else you'll need can be found on Polestar's so-called progressive instrument binnacle display. You view through the vegan leather stitch wheel with its squarical Polestar branded central boss. The drive for simplicity features here too, with just 2 viewing options based around 1 basic layout, all of it accessible via this button on the right-hand steering wheel spoke. The standard one sees navigation directions flanked by a digital speedo on the left, while a battery readout with a power and charge indicator features on the right. All that happens if you press the view button is that the left and right speed and battery readouts shrink to accommodate a central nav section that expands into an almost full screen map. Everything's clear, concise and easy to read at a glance. What else? Well, there'll be a light and airy cabin feel if you've added in this lovely fixed panoramic glass roof, which has classy branding at its leading edge, but lacks a retracting cover because embedded UV ray tinting makes one unnecessary. Your frontward vision is fine, thanks in part to the slightly raised driving position conferred upon this car by its SUV-style CMA platform. Your view towards the back is much less satisfactory thanks to the small rear screen, though so good is the rear camera system and parking sensor setup that you won't really notice this as an issue too much. The seats, as usual on Swedish cars, are brilliantly supportive in all the right places, and as we mentioned earlier, you can have them trimmed in this soft Napa natural leather if you've got more to spend and find yourself fed up with the whole vegan vibe. Perhaps they could do with a fraction more in the side bolsters for really fast cornering, but the lumbar support, heating and semi-electric powered adjustability comes as standard, and they've been nicely lined up with the pedals. Storage space provision isn't particularly exemplary, but this box between the seats, the lid of which doubles as a slidable elbow rest, is mainly taken up by a second cup holder. The primary one lies just in front where, if used, your morning beaker of oat milk latte will rather get in the way of everything below the central screen. This stowage area at the base of the centre stack offers space for a wireless charging mat and a couple of USB-C ports under little rubber covers. An overhead sunglasses compartment is missing and the door bins aren't particularly big, but you do get little cubbies built into either side of the lower part of the centre console, and the glove box with an integrated pen holder is gratifyingly big, though the level of give you get from its lid when open betrays the influence of corporate bean counters, as does the flex in this protruding panel below the Polestar roof logo. Otherwise though, build quality from the Chinese Taizhou factory seems reasonable, and what's lacking in comparison to, say, Audi is made up for by little touches, the lovely soft plink 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 of the indicators, for instance. And of course, there's a warm glow of veganism in the knowledge that this cabin uses significantly less plastic, fewer environmentally nasty chemicals, and more recycled materials than most other car interiors. Okay, time to take a look in the rear. The door opens nice and wide and shuts again with a quality thunk. But you're not going to want to share the rear part of this cabin with more than one other adult. Because of the protruding height of a centre tunnel, you'd think this car wouldn't require, since it doesn't have to house a conventional transmission system, but which is necessary here to house some of the lithium-ion battery cells positioned beneath you. In our view, you really need this panoramic roof to be included in your car's specification. The rear part of this cabin really would feel rather dark and grim back here without it, though the downside of having this glass ceiling is a slight lack of headroom that'll see the heads of lankier 6-footers touching the panel above. Still, legroom is very reasonable by the usually relatively mediocre standards pervading in this class. The optional Plus pack that gets you this panoramic roof also gives you heated seating and tinted windows back here. As for practicalities, well, the door bins are of a reasonable size, twin USB-C central ports are provided, and there are coat hooks on the B pillars. The fold-down armrest has the usual twin open cup holders, there are individual LED reading lights on each side, and you get netted seat back pockets. Okay, we'll finish by taking a look at the boot, the hatch for which, as you'd want, is power operated and embellished if you add the Plus pack with a swipe function, so you can wave your foot beneath the bumper and open it if you're approaching the car laden down with shopping. The capacity revealed at 405 litres is some way down on what you get from a rival Tesla Model 3 at 542 litres, or something conventional like, say, a BMW 3 Series at 480. But those two cars are saloons and this is a hatch. So here you get a more versatile loading space. Plus, because Polestar unfortunately doesn't include any kind of spare wheel, you're provided with this further deep 41 litre well beneath the floor. The usual little touches feature a 12-volt socket and an elasticated strap on the left, which is where the button for the optional extending tow bar sits, while on the right there's a storage net. There are 2 bag hooks and 4 tie-down points, along with a couple of LED lights, and pleasingly a further one on the inside of the tailgate. You also get a ski hatch to compensate for the conventional 60-40 rear seatback split. If you specify the optional Plus pack that we've got here, you'll also have this cargo floor lid-in lid panel, so you can keep the mess from muddy boots out of sight, so out of mind. Or you might want to pull this panel up to keep bags in place. Push forward the rear bench and 1,095 litres of space is freed up. And we haven't finished because, like a few of its rivals, this EV also puts the freed up space beneath its bonnet to good use with a frunk. Unfortunately, unlike with the Tesla Model 3, you can't fit a carry-on suitcase into it, but the 35-litre space provided is large enough to store the charging cables. It's no longer possible to get a Polestar 2 anywhere near £40,000 as you could when we first tested this car back in 2020. As we filmed this updated model in early 2024, the asking prices were kicking off at around £45,000 for the standard range single motor variant, then around £49,000 for the long range single motor version we're trying here, which is the variant most are likely to want. By the way, that's about £10,000 less than the equivalent version of the next model up in the company's range, the coupe SUV Polestar 4. The more powerful all-wheel drive long-range dual-motor Polestar 2 model required around £53,000 from you at the time of filming, and the version of that derivative with Polestar's performance pack fitted cost £5,000 more, so altogether around £58,000. We should also brief you on the manner in which you'll need to buy or lease this car, since it won't ever be sold by conventional dealerships. The closest the brand gets to this kind of thing is what it calls Polestar Spaces, basically automotive department stores in shopping centres. Now, at the time of this test in early 2024, there were only 8 of those, including a test drive hub in Milton Keynes. But Polestar also engages in short-term pop-up shopping spaces at malls around the country. The primary idea, though, is that you should place your order online via the British section of the Polestar.com website, then connect into the brand as and when you need to. They'll come to you when your car needs servicing, 3 years cover for which is included in the price. You're going to need some perspective on those asking figures in terms of market segment rivals. So perhaps we should start with the Volvo models that share all of this Polestar 2's engineering, the EX40 and the EC40. You might expect these Volvos to cost a bit less than this Polestar, particularly as their driving range figures are a little lower. Actually, the opposite's true. At the time of filming, if you were looking at a base Polestar standard range single motor model, you'd have needed around £3,500 more for an equivalent EX40 and around £8,500 more for an equivalent EC40. Most potential Polestar 2 customers, though, are also considering rival models outside of the Volvo Polestar conglomerate. A Tesla of some sort would probably be top of your alternative model wish list. You can't ignore the US brand's market-leading Model 3, especially now that it's been considerably improved. One of those in base rear-driven form undercuts a base standard range single-motor Polestar 2 by around £5,000. But that base Model 3 won't take you anywhere like as far as this Polestar on a single charge. You could argue, though, that what's on offer from this 5-door Polestar is more accurately replicated by a hatchback Tesla rather than a saloon one, in which case your comparison point will be with this US brand's 5-door Model Y. One of those cost around £53,000 in base rear-driven form as we filmed, so around £2,000 less than a Polestar 2 standard range single motor. What about other segment options? Well, also clustered around this Polestar 2's base £45,000 starting price point are entry rear-driven versions of the Kia EV6 and the BYD Seal, with the base version of the Hyundai Ioniq 6 costing only a fraction more. Around £46,000 would be required as we filmed to get the base eDrive 20 version of BMW's iX1, and you'd need to stretch to around the £50,000 price point if you want the most affordable rear-driven versions of the Mercedes EQA, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Audi Q4 e-tron, the BMW i4 and the Volkswagen ID7. Before finishing your perusals at this price point, don't forget that the base version of a car you might not have considered, the unusual but appealing Fisker Ocean, costs a lot less, priced from only around £36,000 in entry-level sport form, as we filmed. So that's covered off the main rear-driven EV segment alternatives. What about if you're looking at this Polestar 2 in all-wheel drive long-range dual motor form, which, as we told you earlier, was priced as we filmed from around £53,000? Well, a dual motor Model 3 will save you around £3,000, while a dual motor Model Y will cost about the same as an all-wheel drive Polestar 2. If you're casting your net wider, the amount Polestar wants for an all-wheel drive long-range dual motor version of this car is about the same as would be required for a rival Mercedes EQA 300 4MATIC, and around £1,000 less than BMW wants for an all-wheel drive iX1. But an all-wheel drive dual motor Polestar will cost around £1,500 more than an Audi Q4 45 e-tron Quattro, around £3,000 more than would be required for a base all-wheel drive Hyundai Ioniq 6, Kia EV6 or Fisker Ocean, and it's about £5,000 more than you pay for a BYD Seal in all-wheel drive form. Some all-wheel drive rivals cost a lot more. The cheapest all-wheel drive version of the Ford Mustang Mach-E, as we filmed, cost over £65,000, while the all-wheel drive version of the BMW i4 is the vastly more expensive M50 variant, which costs over £70,000. OK, so that's briefed you on the market. Now, if having considered that, you conclude, understandably, that there's nothing quite like a Polestar 2 and want to consider actually buying or leasing one, then you're going to need to know just how generous Polestar's been with standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. Adaptive LED headlights come as standard, along with Thor's hammer daytime running lamps and this car's distinctive full LED rear light bar. Plus, you also get 19-inch 5 double-spoke black diamond cut alloy wheels and a powered tailgate with hands-free operation, so you can open it with a swipe of your foot beneath the bumper if you're approaching the car laden down with shopping. As you'd expect for the money, the spec sheet runs to keyless entry, auto headlamps and wipers, all-round parking sensors, headlamp washers and a full range of camera safety kit, which we'll brief you on in a moment. As for EV stuff, well, all models come with a 6-metre Type 2 Mode 3 charging cable, along with a 3-pin 7-metre Type 2 Mode 2 home charging cable. And you get a configurable one-pedal drive setup for the brake regeneration system. Inside, conventional instrument dials have been replaced by a progressive 12.3-inch digital driver display screen. You also get cruise control, a frameless auto-dimming rear-view mirror and rear-view camera. As for the seats, which in their standard form have charcoal or zinc-coloured, 3D-etched, embossed, textile, vegan upholstery, the front ones have heating and semi-electric powered adjustment with lumbar supports, along with memory settings for the driver. As for media tech, well, there's a huge 11.15-inch centre display powered by Google's Android Automotive OS system with Google built in and incorporating Google Assistant, Google Maps and Google Play Store. 3 years of Google service connectivity is included and the system is constantly improved with over-the-air updates. There's smartphone mirroring for both Android and Apple phones, an 8-speaker, 250-watt premium audio setup and a 3D navigation system that can plot routes between charging points. Changes over this screen from the original model include the ability for users to plan trips on their phones or tablets, then send the planned route to the cabin monitor's Google Maps system. Polestar introduced a Vivaldi web browser for the centre screen in 2021, and with this updated model there's now a Chrome web browser, so you can surf the internet easily when you're parked up and charging. As with every newly launched car these days, and particularly every EV, there's also a standard app. This one's called Polestar Connect, and you can use it to remotely check the charge level and service status of your car, or log your journeys, including their start and end location, distance and duration. Apart from that, the app also allows you to send destinations to the onboard navigation system and sync appointments from your calendar. OK, let's switch our focus to matters of safety, which, as you'd expect from a Volvo-derived product, is a key focus with this car, hence its 5-star Euro NCAP safety showing. Despite not having an internal combustion engine to help absorb a frontal impact in a crash, this electric Polestar 2 claims to be one of the safest cars in its class, which to some extent perhaps explains the extra weight this EV carries around compared to some of its direct rivals. Yes, its CMI platform is basically the same as the one you'll find in a conventional petrol-powered Volvo XC40, but the engineers totally redesigned the front crash structure as part of the switch to this model's full EV powertrain, as well as designing a unique safety structure for occupants and battery. And as you'd expect, there's a wide range of camera safety features. An autonomous braking system called collision avoidance and mitigation is of course standard fit, and this system can specifically detect people and cyclists. There's also an oncoming lane mitigation setup that not only stops you from pulling out into the path of an oncoming vehicle, but can also steer you away from such an impact. In addition, you get a driver alert system that warns of driver drowsiness and a lane-keeping aid that alerts you if you're drifting over lane delineating lines and subtly steers the car back to where it ought to be. There's also run-off road protection and run-off road mitigation as well. A road sign information display pictures speed signs as you pass and displays them on the dash, and a post-impact braking system brakes the car automatically after a crash so that it's less likely then to spin off and hit something else. We also like the connected safety setup, a cloud-based system that keeps a Polestar 2 driver informed about road conditions and potential hazards along their route. Connected safety links Polestar and compatible Volvo cars, transmitting real-time information on vehicle behaviour and external factors such as weather and breakdowns or collisions involving other vehicles. As part of connected safety, a slippery road alert feature tells the driver if there's a risk of slippery driving conditions at the car's present position or on the road ahead. And a hazard light alert feature warns the driver if another connected Polestar or Volvo on the road ahead has its hazard lights on. Of course, you also get all the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. Plus, there are the Volvo-developed WHIPS front seat whiplash protection and SIPS side impact protection systems. And as you'd expect from a car of this price, there's a full complement of 8 airbags, including a full-length inflatable curtain and a driver's knee airbag. Like all newly launched cars these days, there's also an e-call system which will see the emergency services advised of your exact location if the airbags are activated in a collision. Hill start assist, tyre pressure monitoring, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, a speed limiter and a first aid kit also make the team sheet. Like all EV makers, Polestar had to make this car safe for pedestrians as well, who might not hear its near silent approach in urban conditions. So there's an acoustic vehicle alert system, which generates subtle, recognisable sounds that help the car make itself heard, warning folk on the pavement you're about to pass. OK, so we've covered everything you get as standard on a Polestar 2, so now let's take a look at options. Now on the mainstream models, your primary choice is between 2 extra cost packs. The Pilot Pack, mainly concerned with visibility and safety, which costs £2,000 more, and the Plus Pack, which deals more with luxury features and costs £4,000 more. So let's start with the Plus Pack, because nearly every Polestar 2 customer tends to want that. The Plus Pack gives you a 600-watt Harman Kardon premium sound audio setup, while the seat upholstery is upgraded with a vegan weave tech finish with black ash deco inlays. The front seats get full 4-way powered adjustment with a manual cushion extension, and there's heated seats in the rear. There's a huge fixed panoramic roof with a projected Polestar symbol, tinted rear windows, a heated steering wheel, heated windscreen washer nozzles, a particulate matter air quality sensor, high-level interior illumination, and a rear cargo floor lid-in-lid panel so you can better deal with muddy boots. Plus, there's a foot sensor for the power-operated tailgate, and the Polestar digital key feature, which allows you to unlock and start the car with your smartphone, and also works together with the main Polestar Connect app to make car sharing easier. Thanks to this, when Polestar come to collect your car for servicing, you won't even need to give them the key. You'll simply need to authorise them via the app. And a final key part of the Plus Pack is Polestar's heat pump, which reduces the need to use valuable battery capacity for preparing and sustaining the cabin climate. The heat pump system uses ambient heat as well as residual thermal energy from the drivetrain to reduce energy requirements for climate control by as much as 50%. In colder weather, and most effectively between 5 and 15 degrees Celsius, a range improvement of as much as 10% can be achieved by using this feature. Now let's consider the Pilot Pack, which, as just mentioned, is there to give this car an enhanced package of safety and driver assistance features. We have that here. You get more sophisticated pixel LED headlights, complete with active bending and cornering light functions, plus LED front fog lights that also turn with the bends. And the Pilot Pack also includes a limited amount of semi-autonomous driving tech, combining adaptive cruise control with the Volvo Pilot Assist setup, which at highway speeds can take care of braking and throttle control for you and also keep you in lane, provided you keep your hands on the steering wheel. Extra camera safety equipment included as part of the Pilot Pack runs to a blind spot information system with steer assist setup that warns you if you're about to dangerously pull out in front of another vehicle, and will apply steering assistance to ease you back to safety. Also included in the Pilot Pack is cross traffic alert, which will warn you of oncoming vehicles when you're reversing out of a space, and is able to automatically brake the car if necessary to avoid a collision. There's additionally a rear collision warning and mitigation system that warns you of impending rear-end collisions, and if one's inevitable, will take steps to mitigate the severity of the impact. And you get emergency stop assist, which, if you're taken ill at the wheel and can't operate the vehicle, it'll bring the car to a controlled stop. It's all very reassuring. The other available option pack can only be had with the top long-range dual-motor four-wheel drive model, the Performance Pack, which costs £5,000 more and proved particularly popular at the launch of this car when over a third of all customers ordered it. This performance-orientated pack gives you upgraded Brembo brakes with gold calipers, forged 20-inch 4 multi-spoke forged alloy wheels with stickier Continental Sport Contact 6 tyres, and signature Swedish gold details inside and out, including gold seat belts, which sound a bit naff, but actually look very nice. But the Performance Pack's main feature is a set of manually adjustable motorsport-developed Öhlins dampers. These drop ground clearance from 151 to 146 millimetres and offer 22 settings of adjustment, all of which must be done with the car on a ramp, because the dampers have to be adjusted with manual knobs you'll find either on the bottom of the inverted front struts or hidden behind panels up inside the rear wheel arches. A Performance Pack equipped Polestar 2 will be supplied with these dampers in a mid-level but still rather stiff setting. You try it like that, then tell Polestar if you'd like the dampers, then tweaked for either firmness or comfort. We'll finish by looking at individual options you can order. There actually aren't that many. The 20-inch 5 V-spoke black silver alloy wheel upgrade we've got here, and a tow bar are the main things. For the interior, you can add non-vegan, full leather upholstery if you're a bit fed up with this car's stripped-back Enviro vibe. And if you want to lift the rather dismal ambience of the cabin and have already specified the optional Plus pack, you can specify ventilated Napa leather upholstery combined with light ash reconstructed wood deco trim. We've got that here. You'll almost certainly end up paying Polestar extra for your choice of paint colour, as only one shade, this test car's magnesium, comes as standard. There are 5 other metallic colour options that'll each set you back £900 more. As for practical additions, well, you can add floor mats and a bespoke luggage compartment mat. There are also load-carrying roof crossbars, child seats and an auto sock to go over the tyres for grip in snowy conditions. As we told you in our driving section, the battery changes made here have had a useful impact on driving mileages. Just in case you haven't yet seen that section, we'll brief you on those all-important class-leading figures again. The entry-level standard range single motor model's revised LG Chem 69 kWh battery will now take you between 313 and 339 miles, up from a best of 273 miles before. A useful improvement and now about the same as you get from a base rear-driven Tesla Model 3. As previously, the furthest you'll be able to go in a Polestar 2 is with the mid-range, long-range single-motor variant we're trying here. And its switch from a 78 to an 82 kWh battery has boosted range capability from the previous 335-mile best to a range that Polestar now predicts to be between 379 to 406 miles. On this test, we've struggled a bit to get near those figures, recording an average energy consumption figure of around 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour, which translates into a real-world total mileage of around 320 to 330 miles. Not far behind and using the same upgraded battery is the all-wheel drive long-range dual motor model, which improves from 298 miles before to a best now predicted to be somewhere between 344 and 368 miles. That's still some way off the 390 mile showing of a Tesla Model 3 dual motor, and with the performance pack fitted to a dual motor Polestar 2, that maximum falls to 352 miles. To be fair to Polestar, other all-wheel drive rivals in this class struggle to go much more than 320 miles, and an all-wheel drive Kia EV6, for example, is down at just 314 miles. Polestar says that carbon emissions for long-range versions of this Polestar 2 with the 82 kWh battery have come down by 1.1 tonnes to 5.9 tonnes per car, previously 7 tonnes per car, thanks to improved cell chemistry. I just mentioned the Kia EV6. Unlike that car or its Hyundai or Genesis segment counterparts, there's still no 800-volt electrified tech here to boost charging times. The usual 400-volt setup remains, but the upgraded battery tech has brought with it quicker battery replenishment. Charging speeds have increased to 135 kilowatts for the standard range single motor 69 kilowatt hour model, though that still isn't particularly impressive by class standards. At a DC rapid charger, 34 minutes will be needed for this base variant to charge from 10 to 80%. At home, using a typical 7.4 kilowatt wall box, you'll need 10 hours and 45 minutes. The longer ranging 82 kilowatt hour battery pack models can now charge at up to 205 kilowatts, which is a bit more like it. This means that a DC rapid charger, 28 minutes will be needed to charge from 10 to 80%. At home, with a typical 7.4 kilowatt wall box, you'll need 12 hours and 30 minutes. Charging stations along any given route are displayed via a simplified Google Maps display on the centre dash screen. This includes live availability data so that you can see in advance which charging points are currently free. And don't worry if your trip takes you somewhere with no online reception. Should you venture into such territory, the car will automatically download maps into its hard drive and switch into an offline mode so that navigational services can continue uninterrupted. Around half of all Polestar 2 sales will be to business buyers keen to take advantage of the 2% benefit in kind tax rating that applies to EVs. At the time of filming in early 2024, that translated into an annual company car tax cost of £180 at 20% and £359 at 40%. That low BIK figure applies until 2025, which is when the current zero figure for VED road tax for EVs will be reviewed. Until that date at least, you'll also be exempt from congestion and ULEZ charges in London. On the move in this Polestar, a readout to the right of the instrument cluster briefs you on battery charge next to a power meter gauge showing whether you're using charge or regenerating it. Plus, the huge portrait screen in the centre of the dash has a range assistant section, which shows your dynamic range, that is, what you're actually currently achieving compared to the best or worst possible, and an instant consumption readout in kilowatts. On the same screen, you can also see how speed, driving style, and climate functions are contributing to this consumption. What none of this will really tell you is your actual real-life overall contribution to the environmental planet zeitgeist in driving this car. No EV is really zero emission. The energy to drive it, of course, has to come from somewhere. And sure enough, if you take current UK electricity power generation figures into account, this Polestar delivers a well-to-wheels CO2 contribution of 37.2 grams per kilometre. If you're converting to an electric vehicle from a previous combustion model, you'll obviously need to factor in the cost of an EV charger for your home and perhaps also the office. There's still complexity around the best charging hardware to choose and who's eligible for a government grant. And obviously the costs can vary depending on the distance from your main meter to the charger, along with other factors. There's lots of advice out there, of course, to guide you. We consulted plugmein.com, who offer customers everything from choice of charger to installation and ongoing maintenance. They've advised us that even with increased energy prices, the cost of running an EV and charging it at home on a dedicated tariff is still only around half the cost of running your previous petrol or diesel car. What else? Well, a little disappointingly for a brand looking to change convention, there's the usual 3-year or 60,000 mile warranty, but the battery's covered by its own 8-year or 100,000 mile package. There's 12 years of anti-corrosion cover. And insurance, well, for the base standard range, single motor, 69 kilowatt hour version, it's Group 40E. For this 82 kilowatt hour long range single motor variant, it's Group 44E, though for some strange reason, that falls to Group 42E if you fit the optional Plus pack. If you go for the more powerful 82 kilowatt hour long range dual motor all-wheel drive model, it's up at Group 44E or 45E with the performance pack fitted. All these groupings are quite a bit higher than they were when we first tested this car, but they're still significantly lower than those applied to a rival Tesla Model 3, which sits in insurance groups 48 to 50. For this Polestar, you'll also want to know about likely residuals, this being still a relatively upcoming brand. But fear not on that score. Industry experts predict that across the range, this car should retain between 50 and 53% of its original value after 36 months and 36,000 miles, which is pretty near top of the class. The long-range dual-motor versions do best. That's about the same as a BMW i4, but significantly better than a rival Tesla Model 3's 47% rating. Servicing dates for this Polestar 2 are based around the car's running time and mileage covered. Polestar says the car generally won't need to be looked at for the first 2 years or 18,000 miles of use. The brand will contact you when a garage visit's needed, or a message will pop up either on the screen or on your app. As we filmed, the brand was including 3 years servicing up to 31,250 miles within the asking price. Polestar's keen to emphasise the efforts it's made towards environmental sustainability as a brand. That's of course a key part of the company's ongoing operations. And it's worth mentioning here because it's likely that part of the reason you'll have wanted an EV like this in the first place is to make your own contribution towards a reduction in pollution and global warming. Polestar is at the front of this change in vehicle manufacturing, and the company plans to create its first carbon neutral car by 2030. In partnership with Volvo, Polestar is implementing global traceability for the cobalt used in its batteries. And traceability of the raw materials used in the production of lithium-ion batteries is one of the main sustainability challenges faced by car makers. The Swedish manufacturer is committed to full traceability, and by applying blockchain technology, its customers can drive electrified Polestars knowing that the cobalt for the batteries has been sourced responsibly. We continue to like the Polestar 2, and it couldn't be more different from arguably its closest rival, the Tesla Model 3, an EV that slightly awkwardly embraces the current eco-zeitgeist. This Polestar, in contrast, feels resolutely normal and represents a far easier transition to battery mobility for someone currently in a 3 Series, a C-Class or an A4. In that respect, it's really more like the BMW i4. Like that Bavarian EV, this one would ideally weigh a lot less and go a lot further on a single charge, as future Polestar products hopefully will. But the midlife changes made to this model have significantly improved its EV mileage, quickened charging times and ramped up driver involvement. It's really the car that ideally the brand would have had right from the very beginning. But to be fair, as we told you back in 2020, that original model was already very good, which was just as well. Given the company's current financial challenges, it's safe to say that if it hadn't been, it's doubtful whether this ambitious brand would still be with us, given that it was almost completely reliant on this single design in the first 4 years of its existence. The Polestar 2 has undergirded the company during this difficult startup period, building the foundations for a brand that by 2025 expects to annually sell over 290,000 cars globally. Not everything's ideal here, of course. That the marque has done nothing to improve this car's rather over-firm ride is a disappointment, and you'll really need to think very carefully before worsening it further with these larger 20-inch rims. But that apart, some really useful improvements have been made here, enough to keep this car at the forefront of its increasingly crowded class. And the price increase to reflect all of the updates is reasonably modest. Which leaves this car even better able to get on with delivering what is arguably the most complete EV experience in the £45,000 to £60,000 price bracket. It has a Tesla-like feel of innovation, an Audi Q4 e-tron-like feel of quality, and a BMW i4-like feel of sporting purpose, all with rare, unique branding and packaging. Choosing one of these would still be something of a step into the unknown, but we can see why you might.